Okay, so I work at a place upstairs. We do data collection on used cars, and we try to approximate what car values are worth. What we feel that good areas for cars are. So if they have a Honda Civic in Florida, it probably sells better in Chicago. And so we do all this big data gathering, and we try to approximate what's the best seasonality, locality, price structure, all this stuff to make money off used cars. So right now we're in the very fledgling. It's about a 4-month-old company. So all we're doing is just going out and gathering as much data as we can. So we use these scrapers, and we do it in. We have a web interface and Salesforce interface, and we go out. We have scrapers kick off scrapes, and then pull this data in, and then we have another service that'll go out and scrub all that data, and then turn all that data. We do auto check, which is kind of like a Carfax on it, and then Black Book, which is a way to get wholesale values of cars. And then after that, we convert it to a type of data that we want, and then we put all this in CouchDB, and then these become vehicles, and we have them through another interface that people can go on and look at the cars and watch them all. So everything in that pipeline was all Node, from the initiate of the scrape to the scraping to the saving. And so what I figured I'd show you guys is how we do Docker with it, because we deploy smaller boxes with Docker to do all this stuff. And so I'll just run through a build process of Docker and how all these things work. And then I'd go more into the scraping and all of that, but the problem with it is we basically are not working right now. So I'm going to SSH into a box. And then we use Fleet and Koros. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those. So we have Koros and a Fleet.
You zoom in.
Yep, sure can. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is we're going to set up build through Fleet, and then
Fleet and Koros.
So Fleet and Koros. Koros is like a distributed Ubuntu basically. So it's Chrome's desktop or Chromebook software, and they converted in these smaller, lightweight appliances for making VMs. And so Fleet is a management system. It uses etcd for keys. And so you can clone keys out and push up configurations of Koros with the etcd configuration. And then Fleet will manage all that stuff and push out your Dockers to whatever your host instance is. So, and I'll go through this stuff as we do it. So I am connected to your machine. We will start with a Docker file. So if you... We'll go to the car wash, and then the VI Docker file. So, can you guys all see it fine? Nope.
Very small.
Okay. Is that better?
Slightly.
A little more?
Just for the back.
Okay. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So in the Docker file, basically what we do is we have a base that we call Node 0.12.1, and this is just a base configuration for our Docker images to pull from, and then we, it's just like abstracting away, so we can add our own configuration on top of it, so we override whatever the next configurations items are. So we set up just environment variables that we need for the Node stuff, and then at that point, after we set up the environment variables, we have a private Node registry that we configure to pull up some of our private stuff. And then we let it know that the work directory on the remote machine is going to be under user source app. And then we run a git clone command to pull data from our Git repository and then clone it into this local repo and then build from there. And then we run an install. And then after we run the install, I'm going to have to scroll down. We expose a port out, which is what we use 3002 for this machine. And then we run an npm start command to kick it all off. And so inside of this instance, there's a couple workers, which I won't really get into, but we use a lot of AMQP with multiple workers, kind of spread out the workload. So that's why we use the npm start. So I'm going to run a Docker build real quick. So we run a build. From there, we have to now with Fleet, what we do is we use a tag command because we have a registry of Docker images that we create. And so I'm going to tag this build, if you see at the bottom, we'll tag it with a this tag minus F, and we'll take an already. I should probably actually give you guys a better. So from that, we have this Docker build. If I look at it, let's see if it's there. There are Docker images. Yeah. Okay, so if we've created, now that we run that build command, we've created this image right here, which is called the Sweet Red Car Wash. And so what I'm doing is, when I tag this, I'm going to take this command right here, and I'm going to tag it into this, and then get it ready so that we can push that item out to our Docker registry. So I'm going to run a tag on this right now. And then now it's tagged, and we can do a push, and this will go up to our Docker registry. And you'll watch it. This might take a minute. So while I'm doing that, basically, what this push does is it just takes a segment of it and pushes it all up to this registry, where we can then go into a Docker registry box and grab the actual file and push it out to another server, and then that'll spin up that server for us. So the next item we will go to, and we can look at it. Let me increase font. Can you guys see it now? Everyone see it? Okay. So from here, I'm going to run a. This is our fleet box. So this is what I'm into. So we run what's called a fleet CTL, and this will list units to know what's going on there.
2 E's.
What's up? Yeah. Thank you. And so you can see we've created this car wash alpha from here, and this one's already active. So we created a new version of it when I ran the tag and the push command. So basically, I pushed a new thing up there, and it's ready to be deployed from. And this has a tag onto that registry right there. So what I have to do is I have to kill this. So I'll run a fleet CTO, and then I'll run a destroy. And then give it car wash offload service. And it kills it. And then I have to start it again. And wait for a minute. I can go to this actual machine and see it tagged out. So 174. And then look at PS. And you see that we have that tag right there pushed out to this machine, which is on a remote port, or remote box of 174. So I know it's all kind of like confusing. You didn't really get an intro on it, but basically we took a Node application, and we grabbed it from the Docker from a repo, and we built it all up, and then turned it into an image file just like you would with any VM system. And then we took that VM and pushed it up into a registry where it can be accessed from some other server to pull down from and deploy anywhere we want to. Now on top of that, we can do automatic deploys with all of this stuff because we have that server we can deploy from. And then we can also, as well as automatic deploys, we can do process monitoring and spin things up on the fly or drop things on the fly if we need to, and use it kind of like a garbage collection to where if it goes for 12 hours, we can drop it and spin it up again so that, servers don't get too overloaded. But all in all, that's it. Any questions? Nope.
You said you were doing some monitoring.
What's up?
You were doing some process monitoring.
We just started doing the monitoring stuff, and so, but that's what the fleet box is for. That you see, you basically get to watch kind of your fleet of boxes out there and see what's going on. If they drop, you can spin them up again.
So automatically.
Yeah.
Cool. And what about logging? You guys have
So logging, we have a log stash instance that we push out to. So we basically use Winston. Yeah, so we use Winston to push out all the logging to, and all this stuff will go to a log stats instance, which will then feed into our Elasticsearch. And then we have a Kibana front end for that to watch logging. Yeah.
I found Kavana kind of generic. Have you looked at Graylog 2 at all?
I haven't. It's been. I'm kind of the lead on all this stuff, so it's just whatever I can get into.
Sure.
Like I didn't know anything about Docker or AWS. Except very simple things, and then I had to get into all this. So
Yeah. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would love to hear more about it if you know more about it, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, it's a pretty, we have a pretty unique architecture overall. And I can come and do a talk again about it, but we're just not ready for it yet. But we use kind of RabbitMQ to push data around between multiple instances. And then we subscribe to queues, pull information from there. And then we have a problem with, we get rate limited by a couple of our data providers. And so we have to use kind of this dead letter queue to just push items into and then pull that off. So we wait a minute or 2 minutes for things and then batch that into another segment of calls and then throw all that out and pull that back and then update that data. So it's really just grab a bunch of stuff, segment it, make it wait, all with queuing, and then pull that stuff down and then add the data to it and then move it along the pipeline again. So, but yeah, I can get into it more. Just we're not ready to demo. So, cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
So how do you feel about Docker Registry in general?
The Docker Registry?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Okay. No problems with it?
What's up?
No problems with it? Happy with it?
I have more problems with Koros.
Okay.
Because I find Docker itself is kind of rough around the edges.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of stuff, because it's new. It's 2 years old.
Yeah, volumes aren't first-class citizens, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a ton of, you're going to bleed a little bit if you move to it.
Sure.
But, that's just, part of being, cool.
Yeah.
And,
cool. Right.
And then, so Koros has a lot of problems with it. Sometimes we find that boxes just drop weirdly at sometimes.
Okay.
And I don't know why. If I had to go back, I probably would have done Ubuntu and not this whole fleet thing, but we're so deep into it now that I can't do anything about it. So, anything else? No? All right. I won't keep it. Thanks, guys. All right, cool. Who wants to learn about some ES6? Cool, so we're going to talk about using ES6, also known as ECMAScript, also known as ES2015. I don't like that numbering scheme, but you might see ES2015 somewhere. They changed that because they wanted to rev the language more often, and this implies they will do it yearly, or more continuously at least. But whatever. I'm going to call it ES6 the whole time, so don't get confused by that. Has anyone been using ES6? Yeah, a couple people.
ES7?
ES7 even,
Is
yeah.
it going wait?
That's pretty cool. We'll talk a little bit about ES7 as well. But I've been using it in Ember specifically. If you use Ember CLI and you create a new Ember app, you will have a lot of these ES6 features available to you right out of the gate, which is pretty cool. And this is really just the next version of the language. And by next, I mean people have been implementing it already for a while, people being browsers and Node. So you can use a lot of these features today. But I'm going to talk about what the features are and then where you can use them and how, so that you know about it. But I also wanted to talk about CoffeeScript and TypeScript and some of the other languages that have come out because JavaScript, especially ES5 and below, has been so cumbersome to use. And I think that these things are really great that they happened and that they've really driven a lot of the ES6 design. But at some point in the future, they might need to go away or evolve. Even though ES6 is really cool and I'll talk about using it, I still also really like CoffeeScript. I like not having to type so many braces and parens and some of the other features that it has, but a lot of it's being pulled directly into the language, so you can make the case that we don't really need CoffeeScript anymore. TypeScript does different things, and those are being proposed for
ES7 and whatnot as well. But I think you can make a good case that CoffeeScript probably doesn't need to exist at some point in the future, or at least not be as popular. But we don't get to decide what's popular, so that's sort of a moot point. But it is interesting. I still like CoffeeScript, but I think I'm going to be moving my stuff to ES6, just as a point of reference. So let's go over the features. I'm going to cover the ones that I find most interesting. There are going to be others that you can look up and find if you want. And then I'm going to show some code examples of each, just so you can see what it looks like. And then at the end, we can go through, if you brought your laptops, we can go through a small course that I found that we could sort of play with this and actually implement some stuff in ES6. So the first thing that I want to talk about is let and const. These are replacements for var when you're declaring variables. And the primary difference here is that let, especially versus var, is that let is block scoped and var is function scoped. And so here you see we're declaring a function, which means any vars we declare in here would only be available in here. But if you wanted to create an arbitrary scope like this, or even just do an iteration with for in or something like that, you could create vars in there, but they would be available outside, which is a problem. So this lets you create, anytime you have curly braces, you can just always think of it this way. Anytime you have curly braces, you have a new scope. And as long as you always use let, that will always be true. So there's really no reason to use var anymore. It will be kept around forever because backwards compatibility. But if you're using ES6, you should always just be using let. And if you don't plan to change that variable, you should be using const. Const creates a constant that can't change. In some environments, if you try to change it to something else, it will silently do nothing. And in some environments, you will actually get an error. Yes?
Do children's scopes have access to their parents?
Yes. Yes, you can still access stuff above you and shadow stuff. It's just you won't leak outside of your scope like you will with var.
What are your thoughts on const with objects? It feels a bit weird for me on that one.
It does. I've only really started using const so far. I'm just using them for normal strings and integers.
Like in C, the define equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say const was a function script?
That it was what?
Function script?
Const is still block scoped. Yes.
But it's the reference is constant, so you can't change what x is pointing to.
Right.
If x is an object, you could change fields on that object, which is where some of the confusion could come from.
Yeah, so it would be nice if const like auto froze the. I don't know. That would just be messy.
Is this a final equivalent of Java?
A final equivalent to Java?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, I'm not as up to date with my Java. Yep.
One thing about the transpilers, if you want to use this feature today, is that they tend to get let wrong because they have to compile it down to var, so watch out for that.
They can. So there are two approaches to compiling this. One is creating an immediately executed function every time, and the other is to use var but make sure you're not reusing that symbol that you compile to. So they could technically cause a problem, but I've not experienced problems so far with
Name is my use case.
the var compilation. Yes, it also depends. Like if your application's written in ES6, and especially if you're in like a Node environment or something, I don't think you'll have as much trouble as if you're trying to reference other JavaScript that happens to be on the page. You might get conflicts because the compiler doesn't know about them. But it still seems unlikely because it uses underscores. Anyway, that doesn't matter as much. If you're having problems with how this is compiled, you should contact however you're using this and see if you can get that fixed. But it is something to be mindful of. These won't run natively in all cases. Promises. So promises have been around for a while, but they've always been in userland. So we've always had to have a package or another library to handle them for us. Now they're actually adding it to the language. And as with basically all ES6 features, if they add it to the language, I would just suggest that over time you start using that, unless you have a really good reason not to, over whatever your favorite version of that is. And again, there would be good reasons not to all the time, but starting a new project, instead of using RSVP or Bluebird or whatever, like maybe try using the native promise, because it's just going to be easier for you. Unless you identify a specific case where that's a problem. What's up?
So which standard of promises have they put in?
What's that?
Which standard of promises have they put in? Do they go with crystal vowels or do they go with jQuery?
It's not jQuery. I believe this is the A+ spec promise.
Crystal vowels then, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone can confirm or deny that, but I believe that's the inspiration for this version. I would hope that it's compatible, but I actually haven't explicitly checked that. jQuery promises aren't really promises, so I definitely recommend not using them if you can avoid it, because you'll get confused when you try to use real promises. The term people usually use for jQuery is they use deferreds instead of promises, but it's less important. But if you're not familiar with promises, it is a way to encapsulate an eventual response to a function call. And it's basically like an asynchronous value that you can check later, which is really interesting. So when you create it, you have to pass it this function, this resolve reject, and that is how it's going to decide whether or not it was successful or not. And that can be asynchronously, you can execute that. So that's what this does with the set timeout example. And then you call .then to figure out what you do when it has a successful value. And there's dots catch when you have an error value. But you can look more into promises specifically, but ES6 promises is pretty cool. Symbol, this one's very strange, especially if you have no experience with symbols in other languages. It's basically, if you want to create an object and have keys on that object that reference data, you're going to be using strings. If you try to use something else, it'll try to two-string it, and that can be really confusing. And if you want to expose it to someone else, they have access to your keys in that object. So symbol, I think this is at least one interesting use. I'm still trying to figure out where they're best used, and if people have examples, definitely let me know. But in this case, they're using a symbol. Well, we'll talk about what a symbol is first. It's a unique value. You can pass it a string, and that's just for debugging purposes, like what you might call the symbol, but that has nothing to do with its uniqueness. So if you use a symbol to index a value on an object, like you see here, it says this subkey equals private data, then you can't retrieve that value without the key, which is the symbol. So when someone tries to use it later with the string key, it'll get undefined. This one's just weird. This is one I know less about. If someone else has some thoughts on symbols, it's just an interesting way to also index values in objects. Seems to be the primary use case of hiding that key and value from some other consumer. For of, so this is something that you might be familiar with in some of the compiled JavaScript languages, where you can more easily iterate over the values of especially an array. And this is just the example, but for let word of data will give you one instance of each of those values. So in raw JavaScript, you don't have to say I equals 0, I up to length, or length -1, and all of that ceremony. You can do this natively in the language, which is pretty cool. And the difference between this and in is that of is more about data, and in is more about the keys to that data. So you'll want to use them appropriately. But it's nice that this is getting into the native language. Generators are also a very strange feature because they're built as a way to let you call a generator function multiple times and get different values. But some of the most interesting uses of generators I found have nothing to do with that whatsoever, which is always fun. And this is an example of using it for some asynchronous control flow. So to create a generator function, you use this function star, and the star goes between the word function and the parens. And that means this is a generator function. It is a special type of function. And you can call it multiple times, and it's going to return these values that say, these objects that say value and whether or not it's done. So a lot of examples you might see are of you generating like the Fibonacci sequence or an infinite counter of some sort. But you can have them actually finished too. But they get more interesting when you do things like this, where get, whatever get is a generator function that makes this call and then responds so that when you call it here, you basically have code that looks synchronous, but is written. It's written almost like synchronous code, but it's very asynchronous. Yields will say like, stop executing this function, go execute whatever I'm yielding to, and then come back when you're done. So instead of doing that with a callback, you can do that with generators. And there's a whole web framework called Koa that's written based on this idea. And the interesting thing about that is that your requests are written in generators so that you can, for example, when you're writing middleware, especially in Express and other languages that use Connect or whatever, other libraries, you can write middleware coming in and then you can respond, but you can't write middleware that manipulates something both in and out from something else that responds. And Koa gives you that. You can look up that example more specifically, but it's an interesting way of saying, do this work, and then yield to whatever other bits of middleware there are, and then on the way back up before we respond to the user, do this other bit of work. And I can contain that in one function with a yield in the middle, rather than multiple functions or different types of middleware or something like that. But yeah, generators used for lots of interesting use cases, none of which are really what people tell you about when you say, this is what a generator is, which I find very interesting about them. Any questions about generators? They're strange.
How do you recommend wrapping your mind around that? Because every time I see these examples, I just...
There's no... You just keep looking at it, and you eventually go like, oh, I guess I get it, and then you don't. So...
Then you get that first bug, and then you finally learn it.
Right. Yeah. You just have to try and use it. It's very strange. I haven't found a good way to explain it. If someone else has a good way, definitely let me know. The arrow function. This is something that's borrowed from CoffeeScript and maybe other compiled to JavaScript languages, where instead of writing the word function and then your params in curly, you can put your params first, and then you can put this. It's called the fat arrow. This equals arrow, and then curlies. So this saves you from writing the word function over and over and over again, but it also has another important property where it actually changes the value of this inside that function. It like auto binds it to the context in which it's called. So here we're creating a person constructor and we're setting a property on it, what it's called. And then later we're updating that property, but this refers to the same thing because we're using fat arrow. Does that make sense?
So skinny arrow would refer to which scope?
There is no skinny arrow. They did not add that to the native language, which makes me a little sad. So if you're familiar with that in CoffeeScript, that doesn't exist. So if you don't want the context to change, you still have to use the normal function declaration syntax. Which is a little strange because then you have the mix of both. But that's the way it is. But if I could only pick one, I guess this is the one I would use more often. Especially not inside of libraries, but like inside of applications.
Can you use the arrow on the window level scope?
Yes. I imagine just it attaches to window. What's up?
Is that kind of, I might be wrong about my function, like this, so I understand that normally this refers to whatever the scope is. But inside a function, it would be that function scope, so you can create like an object in that term. Isn't that kind of like in anonymous functions? Is the scope for anonymous functions always?
It's always window.
Okay, so that's basically the same as anonymous.
This is changing the context. It's changing the value of this to be the same as the context in which it's defined. So both thises on this page refer to the same thing. So it's equivalent to, we can actually go in here. So normally you would say function, open, close, whoops. And then on the function, if you're familiar with the bind, you could do that. So here, this, we're still outside of the scope, so it would refer to this. And it's saying bind this inside the function to the one I provide outside the function. So those are functional.
If you don't have that bind, what does this refer to in this
It would be window. It doesn't know what to bind to. So you also might often see something like our self equals this, and then you do self.
Right, okay, that's what I've seen.
Sorry.
That
Yes.
self equals this is kind of a workaround.
Yes. So you don't have to do that anymore with the fat arrows.
Understand. All right, thanks for clarifying.
There. And also, if you have no params, I think you need the parens. If you have one param, you don't. And if you have more than one, you do. So just use them. It's okay. Just use them. Like sometimes, like it can get kind of nice if you wanted to do something where like if it's really that simple, maybe. But
Is the curly braces only going to be there, or is that?
no, I don't think you need them if it's just a single expression.
And then the return is assumed.
Yes, and then it's assumed return as well.
Also, arguments is not available. Well, arguments will refer to the parent scope. The arrow functions don't have their own argument object when they're executing. So you probably shouldn't be using arguments in ES6, but if you do, that may surprise you.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. It's good to know. Cool. Other questions on arrow functions? It's really handy. I don't know how many times I've typed function in my life, but it's a lot. And people complain about stuff like this, like, oh, typing function's really a bottleneck in your day. Like, it just makes me feel better to like not have to type it. So if it makes me feel better, then like, why are you complaining? Template strings. So this is also, I don't know if it's necessarily borrowed from CoffeeScript. That's just where I have experience from these types of things. So I might refer to CoffeeScript a lot. But this type of thing is in CoffeeScript, which is really handy. It is a way of interpolating values inside of strings. So to define them, you actually use this backtick. There's now a third way to define a string, well, besides the constructor, but like single quote, double quote, and backtick all create strings, which is interesting. And this gives you the syntax, this $curly, and that will interpolate that value in that place in that string. And backticks also give you multi-line strings, so you don't have to like go to the next line plus and a new string and do stuff like that, which is pretty cool.
Do you have this backtick to use this?
Yes. Yep. It is required. Classes. We get real quote unquote classes, at least a class keyword, and they can extend other classes. This does mostly what you expect. This is what how a lot of people implement classes in their own frameworks anyway. If you really want to get into the details, you should definitely look up like how exactly it works. But it will let you do a lot of interesting things, like a constructor function, getters and setter functions. You can do static functions on these as well. There are proposals to add more to this, but it gets you pretty far, and it's pretty interesting. You can also do super through here if you need to call up.
Do you know how to set class properties? Is that possible? Or is there
class properties, like you can assign them in the constructor. There is a proposal to add them. So the proposal would actually be that you could do, I think it's like this dot something. It's like putting it inside the curly as a statement, sort of. Yeah. Something like that. But that's not in there right now.
There's the best way to do it right now is just in the constructor.
Yeah.
What would it be in that case? Would it be deal.price or this.price with a shared reference, like from prototype?
I don't know as much about that proposal. I just know that there is one about making that a little bit easier. And I don't know how you would reference values that you expect from the constructor anyway, so why wouldn't you just put it there? I don't know. But that is an open question. Other questions about classes? A lot of these features are also really cool because even though there are a lot of libraries that implement these types of things for you, if they're updated to use the native ones, the size of those libraries go down. So when you're using them, you're sending less over the wire, at least in the browser. On the client, that's not as important, but you'll end up using less memory ideally. Cool.
Would they inherit anything from the parent?
They do. So you can call super on any of your methods, but it also inherits methods on your parent. it works. It's still essentially prototypical inheritance underneath. It should do what you expect if you're familiar with this type of thing. But if you want more details, I would recommend reading up on it. I've not used the actual class syntax much myself. Modules. This is a really exciting part because there are a couple different popular module formats right now, CommonJS and AMD being some big ones. And they both have pros and cons, and there are some other ways of loading modules. And this really, like if you're inventing your own language, I recommend that you add this in from the beginning because it's just really frustrating to have to handle in user land. And this is the official way to do it. And you don't have to use these. You could still use AMD or CommonJS and compile it down. That will totally work and totally be fine. But if you want to use the native formats, these are what they are. And some tools are switching over to using this, which is pretty cool. NPM, it's still unclear exactly how and when it might support stuff like this. There are a lot of edge cases and special things to deal with. But if you're interested in that discussion, that's a whole separate thing we can talk about for hours. But how this exactly works, in your file, you have this export keyword, and that is exposing values from your module, your file, to someone else who might import it. There are two important ways to export something. One is by name, so you can mix it into the assignment, so you could say export var pi equals 4. You could also declare pi somewhere, then at the bottom or whatever, say just export pi. You can also export a default value, which can be anything, so that when you import it, the difference becomes a little bit more clear. This math module is exporting pi, e, and the default export is just an anonymous function, so that when we import it, if we say imports ln from libmath plus whatever, then we are getting the default value. If we use the curlies, we say we want specific values, and the specific values that were also exported were pi and e, so we want those. So this is analogous to, if you're familiar with CommonJS, you would say require. So whatever module.exports is in CommonJS would get assigned to ln, and again, this is sort of where they're not strictly compatible, but you could structure it such that e is ln.e and pi is ln.pi, sort of. That's not strictly true. What?
Yeah, technically you need the .default on the end there.
Yeah, if you're interroping between them, this causes a lot of problems. This is not strictly true. There is a special default named export to interop between them. It is not a good time, but it also brings up some of the interesting benefits of the ES6 module format, which is that if you are only pulling out pi, then that's all the code you get. In CommonJS, if you only destructure out pi, you still get all the code, you still loaded it at all. It's not as good.
What happens if you have multiple default?
You can't. You can only have one. I think you get a syntax error, compile error, hopefully. But yeah, you can only have one default export.
In general, the modules are much more locked down, both via compile errors as well as runtime errors. So some things that you could do in CommonJS, where if you had your require.pi equals 1 would be fine, but under the current system, even with most of the transpilers, pi is frozen, locked, everything. So it's going to throw up if you try to change anything.
And the browser support for this is also not there yet, but it's also sort of weird because even if they add it, you can't really use it because when the browser runtime sees this, it's going to make a request back to your server with a specific path for that resource and pull it out. And you probably just don't want your browser to do that. like to make dozens of other requests, all like, and then get this one back, and then make more requests for that one. It's going to delay your perceived load time. So you sort of have to wait until HTTP 2, which has a bit of functionality to address this specific case, to even use it. So I think that's why browsers have probably been dragging their heels on even implementing it, because even if it was there today, I wouldn't use it natively in a browser. I would still transpile it. And we'll talk about how to use these features in Node as well. Any other questions about modules?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see you did export var pi up there. Could you put export const pi in there?
Probably, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Even though const is not used, is the variable mutable? Pi? Can it be changed?
I don't
Outside
think
of the
so.
scope, it is immutable. Inside of the module, I believe it can still be changed, and I believe transpilers aren't good on this one right now, but I believe the spec says when like full browser support is there, if your module does pi equals 1, it should update anywhere there's a reference. Whereas most of the transpilers right now will give you the value of pi as it was when it was imported.
Interesting.
But for now, don't change it.
Yeah, just consider it immutable. Other questions? Cool. Destructuring assignment. This is also something that I've seen in CoffeeScript, where you can pull out named bits of an array or an object in a much more concise syntax. So this is an example of doing it in an array and an object. And it's sort of nice. It's a little weird when you look at it at first, but you get used to it. But you're using brackets when you're destructuring an array, and you're using curlies when you're destructuring an object. So those two things should sort of make sense to you. In an array, you can skip items if you want by not providing it a variable name, which is interesting. I don't know that you would want to do that often. That might imply something weird about your data, but it is definitely possible. Destructuring objects is something that I do much more often, where, especially in CommonJS, when you want just like a bit of a module, you could destructure it off of your require. But this is just going to pull off that named property from that object and assign it to a variable with that same name. If you want your local variable to have a different name from the property, there is a syntax for that, but it gets really confusing. I recommend just not using that syntax because it's weird. Like, you end up doing this, and I always forget which is which. Like, is the one before the colon the one that's the property, or is that my variable? Like, it's just weird. So if you don't want the same name, I recommend just making it a little bit more verbose and actually either do this and then assign them new names, or don't do this at all and just create two separate lines where you just do normal assignment. So those are the ES6 features I wanted to cover, but I also wanted to talk a little about ES7 because we're always improving the language, apparently. There are these stages will become more important in a moment, but the draft for the next version of the language includes a lot of different features, and some of them might be cut before they're finalized, and some of them will be changed before they're finalized. And to identify like how stable a recommendation is, it uses these stages. And as this number goes up, the more final it is. So stage 0 is, I have no idea, this might not even be a good idea. And stage 1 is like, we should maybe do this. And stage 2 is, this is probably a thing we're doing, and we're just figuring out edge cases and details on how exactly it'll work. And then it goes up to, I think stage 4 is actually final. But there are some interesting things. We're not going to go over them in detail, but list comprehensions is an idea. Class properties, which we talked about briefly before. Async functions, like actually changing the way you can call functions with like that async await. I think that's what this proposal is related to. Decorators, which is also very interesting in classes where you can use some syntax. It might be an @ symbol or a plus and minus or something. It's unclear. But you could say, like, this function is read-only, or this property is read-only. Or it's going to be really helpful especially in Ember, where you can just tag a function as being a computed property of some other properties. It's just going to be a concise way to express those things, especially if you're familiar with the decorator pattern in other languages. They want to do more with import exports. I guess there are some other cases that could be handled there. The rest of these aren't as important, but there are more features. People are always discussing how to improve the language, which is interesting. So let's talk about how you can actually use these. In Node 0.12, and that's where I would start. I wouldn't even look at 0.10. If you want to use some of these, you can use this column, the default stuff, without any changes, just the latest 0.12. Those things work. If you use this -- harmony flag when you actually execute Node, you can also use the things on the right. And I was told you could use lets, but when I tried it, it didn't work. I don't know if anyone else has tried to use lets in 0.12 with the harmony flag, but I get a syntax error. I don't know what's going on there. So I don't think that works yet. But you do get generators and arrow functions if you do that. And then if you want to use it, it's just normal Node, unless you want to use the flag for those other features. For anything that requires a flag, that means that it's still unstable, you can consider it. So I wouldn't really put that in production, unless you really need to for some reason. A lot of times, like, all these features are niceties, like you can build apps without them. So I wouldn't incur that risk just to make things a little bit nicer. But you could definitely play with it and see how it works and give feedback with that Harmony flag. Harmony is the code name for ES6, by the way. That's why it's called Harmony. In IO.js, you can use a lot more of this by default because IO.js has a much more updated version of the V8 engine, which is where these get implemented. So you can actually use all of this on the left by default in IO.js with no flags. And it's all considered pretty stable and supported. If you want to use classes specifically, you need to use this ES staging. You can use -- harmony as well. They alias it because you might be familiar with that. But yeah, most of the cool things that I'm even looking forward to are already available there. So you have to make that decision if you want to put IO.js in production or if you want to stick with your stable 0.10 or you want to update to 0.12. Those are other decisions you want to make. Not related to this, make that decision besides this. But if you're on IO.js, then you get these things, which is pretty cool.
Do you know if anyone's taking these out with a performance test to compare like let versus the transpiler equivalent?
Oh, I'm not familiar with performance tests of native implementations, but that would be interesting to know for sure. Yeah, I guess like let would have to do more checking. Like it might not perform as well, but like it might be super tiny. Like, I mean, guessing about this stuff is never good. Like, wait until you see hotspots. But if someone has like actual performance metrics on this, let us know because that'd be interesting. And then to use IO.js, you have to have it installed, but it still uses the node on your system. And if you want ES staging, you use that flag. There are other flags for other specific proposals, but they're all specific to the thing you want to enable. So you might want the two-string extensions. That would be -- harmony _ two-string, but there's a bunch of them. You would just have to look up the ones you want to try and try that out. Again, anything that requires a flag, probably don't want to put it in production. And then the other thing that we can talk about is called Babel. Babel is it is a transpiler for the next version of JavaScript, whatever that happens to be at the time. It used to be called 6.5, and some other projects sort of merged together to create it. And it seems to be what most people are putting their effort behind on making sure like this is the thing we use. There's another tool called Tracer that traditionally had this role for the community, but a lot of people don't like Tracer because it tries to be a little bit more exact and sacrifices performance for that. At least that's what I've heard. I've not actually used it much myself. Babel still tries to implement the features, but tries to make sure they're performance as well. So you get all these features if you use Babel, And Babel is a transpiler, so you have to transpile your code. So you have to transpile your Node JavaScript to compiled JavaScript to actually run it. But if you do that, then you get all of these. And you also get, on the ES7 list, anything stage 2 or higher is implemented in Babel. Like, it might not yet be, but like their goal is to implement anything stage 2 or higher. So in Babel, you could use the exponentiation operator, which is when you want to raise something to the power of something else, use star star. So you can use that in Babel now. If you want to use Babel, there's a Node package for it, and you can compile your scripts this way, and you can pipe it to Node. I wouldn't do that like in production, but like that's how you can quickly get started with it. There's also a hook for require that you could register, sort of like CoffeeScript and others. So if your project depends on Babel, you can do this other thing below, so that the rest of your code can be interpreted with that first. There will be a performance hit for that, though. So ideally, you would compile it all at build time and deploy that compiled version. If you're already using CoffeeScript or TypeScript or something anyway, this is just doing it a different way. So it's not adding like a lot of overhead that you didn't already have. But if you weren't doing that, a lot of people complain about these extra steps. But once you automate them, they just sort of go. So I don't mind them too much.
Babel does not maintain line breaks like CoffeeScript does. So if you did do a runtime transpile, it would make it extremely difficult to debug because you can't access the source it was actually run.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
Until source maps are available, I personally won't be doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, maybe just stay away from transpiling at runtime. I mean, for many reasons, but. So those are the sort of 3 different ways you can end up using it and what's available in each. I like Babel a lot. I've been using it more on the client side with Ember, where we already have build steps anyway. And there are less concerns about using it there. But it's pretty cool. And it's also nice to have a project that is like the future of JavaScript, and I can always use it. There is a feature that Babel is looking to implement called, I don't know what they're calling it, but like a target matrix of browsers and versions that you want to support. Like, say, our app supports these versions, and it will transpile to that. So it knows that, oh, all of your versions have let already enabled, so we're not going to transpile that. We're just going to make that output. So you can always be, over time, reducing the size of your compiled output because you target newer browsers, but always be able to use the newer features too. So you sort of like shift your development a little bit into the future. And that's the goal of this project, which seems really interesting to me. So that's all I have about that. There is this cool free course that I've just found where you can actually, like, it goes through a lot of the features and it gives you an example and then it asks you to change the example so that it works with the new feature. And it's just some free course that I found. So if we want to go through that and actually get a little bit of experience writing some ES6, I think that'd be cool. You can just type that out. I wanted to have something hands-on, but I couldn't think of, like, build this tiny dumb app or new up an Ember app or something. Like, none of that really made sense, but this seemed like a cool way to actually type some ES6 and see a result. So if you want to set this up, it doesn't take super long. I think there are like 12 exercises, and if you're familiar with some of these syntaxes anyway, you can do them pretty quickly. And then I have some resources later. Real quick, I'll show. There is this ridiculous compatibility table that will show you what environments support which features to which detail. And this is basically unusable except for, I mean, you could look up something specific, but like, why do you want to do that? It's just interesting to see what the different runtimes are and how close they are to implementing like the full spec. And you can see Babel's pretty close up here. It says it implements 74%. And Tracer's at 62. But it also checks your current browser, which is interesting. Firefox 37's up there, which is cool. And then Node and IOJS, you can see that IOJS is bumped up a bit more, but still missing plenty of things. So yeah, it's going to be a while before we can use a lot of this. Yeah, this is huge. natively, but there are tools that will let us use it ahead of time. And then there's also, like, if you want to look at a project that's written in ES6, the Ember source code itself is written that way, which is interesting. So you can find some cool things in here about they just use a lot of the features if you want to see them in use. I find it to be pretty cool. But yeah, let's go through this and then get some experience like writing some ES6 code. I'm going to bring it up here too. So like it describes the features, it shows some examples, and then down here you actually change. I think it's saved like how far I was before. So this wants you need to use object destructuring. Oh, but this wants me to do the thing that I don't like, where you change. Yeah, where you use this syntax. How confusing is that? I don't like features that are confusing. So I guess the leftmost is the variable name. So it wants you to do that. And get rid of this.
What are you using for tooling on this in terms of like linting and IDs?
Oh, you're right. Right now, because I'm doing this in Ember, that doesn't matter, but that's because I'm using Ember, which I'm using Ember CLI, it has those tools built in, and I don't have to add them. So it's using JS hints to keep track of some things, which doesn't track some ES6 stuff, but it will let you do things like not accessing globals unless you declare them and stuff like that, which I find useful. And it will use Babel and Esperanto to compile it, because there's a reason they're using both. I think Esperanto's handling the module stuff because it does it slightly better, and then Babel's used for the rest of it. But all of that is invisible to me. I just see it actually work, which is pretty cool. Other questions about ES6? I think it's neat. I like, even though I don't like the way it does everything, like I still prefer CoffeeScript in some ways, I like having like a single standard that we're all using. So that's more valuable to me, which is why I'd rather we all switch to ES6 modules when we can. I know it's not feasible right now, especially with NPM, but there is work being done to hopefully make that not super painful. But also, like if we're all using the same language or something really similar, I think that's really helpful too. I don't like decisions. I like the decisions to be made, and as long as they're good enough, I can make a different decision if I really need to, but I'd rather not have to make them up front. So some of the work I do at Groupon specifically is removing decisions from teams unless they really want to make them. It's not like mandating, but if you don't want to make these decisions and you just want to build your application, do it this way with these tools and this language and this platform, and then change the one decision you actually cared about or is actually necessary for your application, as opposed to like, we're building a new app. What client-side JavaScript framework should we use? How should we compile our assets? Should we use LAS or SES this time? LAS or SES? Should we try this CoffeeScript thing? Or how about TypeScript? Or let's use Angular. Like, those decisions, like, they're impactful, but they also, you end up spending a lot of time. I see teams spend the first month, sometimes 2 months, just like getting things set up, figuring out what they're going to use, prototyping different examples, when that doesn't matter. So much of that doesn't matter. It feels like it matters ahead of time, but you can change things later. You know what's really important to your domain and the decisions that actually matter. Make those, and leave everything else to. We always write our apps in Ember or whatever, unless you have a good reason not to. doing wrong?
No pass for me either.
You did not use destructuring in your code. Please use the correct syntax. Thought I did.
What's the first line?
I can't change the first line. Wait, I said reveal answer. If you proceed, you only get 10% available points. Oh, I don't care. Isn't this what I typed? Oh, I inverted them. I thought the example showed... See, I always get... That's the problem with this feature. So the before the colon is the property. After the colon is the actual variable name. Great. Oh, this includes some things we didn't talk about. But it explains them. Oh, talks about several things we didn't talk about. Oh, is it before? I forget. Yep. So there's like 12 of these, yeah. This site is sort of weird. It has like 3 courses, but dozens of screencasts. I've never seen it before. I found it the other day. No dates on anything. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any suggestions for future meetups? If we should do something different? If we want to do like project nights or something else?
What do you mean by project nights?
I don't know. I mean, we could define the structure, but like everyone come with some side project they want to work on, or come with the intent on helping someone else with their side projects, and then people could talk about like what they're planning on working on, and then group up if people want to work on the same things. Sort of less structured, just work on Node, and then there's a group of people to ask questions if you have questions about how to do something.
Maybe writing questions on the board or something?
Yeah, or you could just come up and like ask the group, like, hey, anyone want to help me figure out how to do routes and Express or whatever? Something like that. Workshops and the like are cool, but they require a lot of work for the person creating them. But yeah. So if anyone has ideas, let me know. But that's all I have. We can hang out and do some more of this. We could talk about something else, or we could just head out, or whatever works. But there's that crazy, not crazy, but extreme compatibility table. It's always fun. There are even more options to like show additional things. I don't understand. So you can get. Oh, Spartan was listed? I didn't see that. Oh, interesting. 73%. Wow. And people say Spartan is just reskinned IE. Like, I don't think so.
No Trident engine or whatever?
It's pretty different. Yeah, it's supposedly different.
I thought so. I thought it was
Yeah, yeah. But people are claiming that, like, oh yeah, you say that, but it's just the same thing. But
Is it still written in C++?
I have no idea. I don't know much about it other than rumors. I do know that both IE 12 or 11, whatever the latest number, and Spartan will be available in Windows 10 at the same time. And I don't understand how that's a good idea. That just sounds confusing.
What page is this?
What?
Sorry, what page is this that you have up now?
Yeah, this is the URL's a bit much. kangax.github.io/compat table/ES6. I have it here. It's this first link here.
He also has ES6 or ES5 compatibility table. If you search in Kangax compatibility table, you should be able to find everything that he's done.
It's pretty cool.
The only way those two could exist in the same machine at the same time is if there's the same thing. So
That's not true. They could be separate apps. I just meant like the user experience. Is Windows 10 going to encourage you to use Spartan, but if it breaks, be like, don't worry, there's still IE? Like, I don't understand why you would give both to the user. Like, you could just give Spartan and say, like, by the way, new user who logged in for the first time, there is this browser. It's no longer called Internet Explorer, but it's our browser, and you can use it, and it's okay. But it sounds like they're just going to have both of them sitting there, and the user's just going to be really confused, and just use IE anyway, because that's the one they remember, and then I don't get it. I don't have to get it. Maybe there's some grand vision that I don't understand, but
No, I'm pretty sure it's this.
I think it'll be far.
It is cool that they're doing a different browser, although IE is starting to get decent. But it has a lot of badness associated with its name. Wow, Spartan is like the second highest? Wait. Yeah. It's the second highest on this table. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Still covered.
All right, well, we can still hang out for a bit, but I'm going to sign off.